In my recent videos reviewing my purchase of a 365 HD car boat from Maelstrom Marine, I have covered my first impressions and its performance in relatively choppy waters, setting it up to suit my needs, rowing and paddling, how it handled a fast-flowing tide race and how comfortable it is in a full day's journey. This video will be my last review of the car boat, with conclusions and final setup. I hope the series answers any questions others may have regarding this type of inflatable boat. I've now used it in anger with a 6 horsepower and a 3.3 horsepower outboard over some longer days in the water, and will give my thoughts on using those outboards in a solo situation. I'll also include my recent purchase of a Bluefin Inflatable Kayak Seat, which in my opinion is a real game changer for a kayak type boat. In fact, the seat is that comfortable. During the last couple of outings, I even had my coffee break sitting in the boat, rather than having my usual leg stretch. When I went on a day trip around Lismore, I mentioned I found my legs started to get pins and needles in a long 2-hour return stretch without having a break. I put this down to the standard seat only being 30 centimetres above the airfloor and having to keep my legs in the narrow confines of the hull. I made my own framework to raise and support the seat, so I'm now sitting on a comfortable 10 centimetre thick cushion, around 50 centimetres above the air deck, which allows my thick thighs a lot more room to move around. I'm delighted to report that pins and needles in my legs are now a thing of the past, even in longer journeys. I will also add that it's extremely comfortable sitting back with my legs raised in the tubes during those long lure trawling sessions. In fact, it's the most comfortable seating I have had in any of my boats. Of course, the problem of having a seat with a backrest and a small inflatable is a high back can restrict access to the outboard for lifting into shallow drive or attending other outboard relevant operations. Although throttle and steering is not an issue for me, as I have always sat in a bench seat steering with my arm behind my back. It doesn't take too long to get muscle memory to do this safely. The backrest is why I went for a Bluefin seat. The back is held in position by straps and 2 hooks release the backrest, so it folds down and I can easily access all the outboard parts and levers etc. from the boat. The seat must be securely mounted to the boat when using the backrest, because if it gives way underway at speed, it could mean man overboard. I used both original boat benches to attach the seat framework to the boat. I chose to construct my own framework which sits on top of the boat benches, and I have solid fixtures for the seat straps on the framework. The framework is held above the benches and strapped to the benches so it can't move. I also made a strap to go around the cushion as shown, so it can't slip about in the framework. It all works very well and is extremely sturdy. I guess I could have glued D-rings to the tubes to hold the seat, but I had the materials to do it this way, and I hate sitting in a seat that can slip around. The seat itself is well made and of good quality. It comes with an inflatable bladder which I replaced with some memory foam which I had. I will use the inflatable cushion that came with the seat as a pillow for my camping expedition, as it folds small and lightweight. The foam cushion gives a bit more feeling of security when sitting on, rather than sitting in a bag of air. I have no idea how good a value for money the Bluefin seat is, but I'm delighted with it. It's a real game changer for me, as my old backbones enjoy the support it gives. I have covered using the 6 horsepower in previous videos, so as a quick recap, it tops out at 17 miles per hour with myself in gear for the day, although it can feel a bit twitchy at this speed. Cruising around 14 miles per hour is no problem. I need to sit midships to get it in the plane or it goes nose up for a while. However, once in the plane I can sit further back if I so wish. The 365 HD is not really a two-person boat, and I can't comment if a 6 horsepower will plane a 4.5 car boat with two, but I think it would struggle getting on the plane. I have now used the Little Mariner's 3.3 horsepower two-stroke on a few days' outings, so I can give more information on it. When I first tested it, I was in an empty boat apart from myself, and at full revs I was playing around 10 miles per hour. However, I found out the next time I tested it, complete with the weight of a bow box and fishing gear for the day, at full revs it was just got in the plane and did around 8.5 miles per hour. I now have the weight of a seat frame plus all my gear for the day, and it won't get above 6 miles per hour, which is displacement speed in this boat. It's very noisy at full throttle and would drive me mad driving it that way for any length of time, so I accept it will happily cruise around 5 miles per hour at half throttle. I will add that I actually enjoy using a little two-stroke at slow speeds, but then I started my inflatable boat days with a 2.5 horsepower outboard, and have quite a few years' experience of only going at those speeds. I find it very relaxing. I think if I didn't have a small two-stroke, I would go electric instead. And that is about all I can add to my previous videos in the car boat. I'm still delighted with it and I've been using it every day I can to get out in the water. In my usual fashion, the rest of this video covers two very different days out in the car boat. The first day was a wet and blustery day using a 3.3 horsepower outboard. I went round the western edges of the locative, making final adjustments to a bluefin seat and trying my hand at a spot of fishing. Initially I paddled with the outboard and tick over, but soon started to overheat in my rain gear, so used outboard power and tick over while trolling my fishing lure. It was the first time trying the seat out in anger, and I took to it like a duck takes to water. It's as comfortable as sitting in my home armchair. The little mariner gurgled happily along at my back, and it was a very relaxing way to start my day. Unfortunately, the sea trout have long left the loch, and all I caught were a couple of small pollock and a gurnard. All will return safely to enjoy the rest of their morning, although they might have had a sore mouth. My fish finder installation works very well, and it holds bottom even at top speed. However, my patience for fishing didn't hold as well, and when a heavy shower of rain passed overhead, I decided to hang up the rod and go a slow but steady tour around the loch instead. I was actually very comfortable in my seat, and warm and toasty and dry in my waterproofs. The weather brightened slightly and the rain eased as I passed a small stone shore, and as it was coffee time I stopped for my morning break. However, I was that comfortable I didn't get out of the boat. I slipped the coffee in situ. I don't know if it was the coffee rush or the fact I felt very lazy not getting out the boat for a leg stretch. It gave me the energy to pick up the paddle again, and I was off. I love the versatility of the car boat, as I enjoy paddling as well as outboarding. However, like the fishing before with paddling, I soon get bored again and put the paddle away. I went as far as North Cornwall, but didn't go as far as the bridge and falls of Laura. The tide was in the flood, which meant my little outboard would be fighting against the flow, and I knew I wouldn't get far, so turned around and headed up the other side of the loch. The weather in the day was a real mixed bag. One moment it was flat, calm, and the next fierce squalls started blowing up the loch surface into significant-sized waves. The sun sometimes shone brightly in gaps between fluffy white clouds, while at other times the heavens opened and rain poured down from ominous dark clouds. However, none of this stopped me enjoying my day in the water, as I was dressed for the weather. The car boat and the 3.3 horsepower outboard took it all in their stride, and I enjoyed a 5-hour trip just messing around the loch. The following day was totally different though. I used the 6 horsepower outboard and headed for the far end of the loch, as the weather promised to be much kinder. I love when the loch turns flat calm, mirroring the surrounding hills and its smooth surface. It makes boating in these conditions feel almost surreal. I stopped off for my coffee in the wee out-of-the-way bay, which made me realise just how much I'd missed camping here this year. And then it was back to the water, and this time I paddled up the river, which was only 6 inches deep. I also found it's much easier paddling down the river. I hope this video, plus my other ones, illustrate my experience of using a kayak boat and shows how versatile the boat is. Like all boats, it's not perfect in every way, but nothing about it stops me enjoying my day. Although it's a narrow boat, I have never once felt scared it would tip over, apart from my first hour of using it, and that was all in my mind, not in the boat's stability. I've not pushed it to see how far I can tip it before it capsizes, but I can easily sit in one side tube with feet and legs in the water and it still sits as stable as any other inflatable I have. The addition of the kayak seat transformed it into the most comfortable boat I own. Yes, heading into a wind can be a bit difficult to paddle due to its flat bottom. However, it compensated. I just start up the outboard and tick over, and paddling is then a breeze. I intend making a kayak boat my go-to winter boat after I put the Quicksilver rib away for the season. I should add that I have nothing to do with either Bluefin, the seat manufacturer, or Maelstrom Marine, who I bought the kayak boat from. I'm only passing on my own thoughts and experiences with their products. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.